So Firestarter definitely isn't a great movie, but at the same time, it's not a downright awful movie either. What is up everybody, welcome back to my channel Lifestyle Critic. I hope you're having a brilliant day. So in this video we are going to be reviewing Firestarter, which is a science fiction psychological action thriller movie based on the Stephen King novel on the same name, and is also a remake of the 1984 movie of the same name as well. Now this time it's from Blumhouse Productions, and it's a tight 90-minute movie. I mean, it's definitely not an amazing movie that you're going to be talking about for years and years and years, but at the same time, you know, it's not downright awful either. You can enjoy certain aspects of this film. I would say it is such a wannabe X-Men movie. If you've seen any of the X-Men movies, you can definitely see threads from the X-Men franchise brilliant framework of movies that they are trying to adapt and adopt into this film. But that being said, let's get on with the movie review for Firestarter. So Andy and Vicky are two individuals that got experimented on at a young age with some drugs, and this has led to them and granted them having superpowers, both telepathy and telekinesis respectively. They then get married and have a kid called Charlie, who is also a bit of a superpowered individual, and she has the power of pyrokinesis. So the film then explores their survival journey with the lab agents and the police hot on their trail as they are trying to find them and experiment on them again and get their hands on the Charlie character, who is growing and learning how to use her superpowers at a very young age. And she also gets bullied in school, which really triggers all of this. And we get to see whether or not they're going to survive or whether or not they're going to get caught. Now, from a positives point of view, this is a really dark, stripped back, horror superhero based movie. So it's pretty different to other things that you have seen. And because these individuals are superpowered based individuals, it is really, really interesting. And there aren't many superpower based individuals within this specific world. So it's really, really interesting as they feel really, really isolated. And a little bit like, you know, mutants versus humans, you know, should they be experimented on? Should they be disregarded? How is society going to look at them? Of course, it's only 90 minutes in this movie, so they can't pack in too much of all of this stuff in depth. But I feel like what they do explore is really, really interesting and is really adrenaline fueled in terms of, you know, those survival chase-based movies, in terms of, are these guys going to get caught? Are the police and lab agents going to get them? Are they going to be able to experiment on them? Are they going to be stuck in these kind of cells for the rest of their life? And the final sequence in this movie is really, really hardcore and really, really brilliant as well. I mean, it's obviously not as great as these two examples, but there are elements that you can compare to Darth Vader's brilliant slaughter sequence at the end of Rogue One, and very similarly to Luke Skywalker's one in The Mandalorian as well. So the end final sequence of this movie is really, really great. However, from a negatives point of view, this film just feels so muted. The particular aesthetic and style and the way in which everything is working just feels really, really slow, drawn out, which is obviously the particular vision that they're trying to execute with this movie, but it just feels so lifeless, and it's just really, really difficult to connect with the characters and the wider movie as well. I definitely feel like they could have gone so much bigger with this storyline. The premise is actually really, really great, and they do explore decent stuff in the short runtime that they do have, but I just feel like they could have gone even bigger and grander with it. And it ultimately definitely does feel like a bit of a streaming movie, and so from a storyline point of view, even though there are really cool elements in there, I do feel like it definitely does get dragged down as well. So from a cast and characters point of view, they've got a decent cast in this movie, but I feel like they're all really holding back with all of their performances. I feel like they definitely could have thrown so much more energy and given better performances. So let's go through them one by one. So first up we have Zac Efron, who is playing the Andy character, the one who was experimented on at a young age, and is definitely the protector of the Charlie character. But like I said, he's just not showing that much depth or range, which is such a shame, as Zac Efron is such an accomplished actor, and over his body of work across all of the last couple of years, he's really shown that he is a really versatile and brilliant actor. However, in this performance, I just feel like it's really, really emotionless, it's really, really dull. Like I said, the whole film feels earlier on, but what I would say, there are some really, really wicked one-liners from Zac Efron, and he does get a couple of laughs in there, but I just would have loved it if he had really given a lot more in his performance. To his credit, I'm sure it was the script's issue and the way in which the director wanted this film to be executed, but I definitely feel like Zac Efron could have given so much more to the Andy character. Next up we have Ryan Kiera Armstrong, who is playing this world's version of the Charlie character. Of course, we had Drew Barrymore before playing this character, really kick-starting Drew Barrymore's career. So it'll be interesting to see if this actress has a very similar brilliant trajectory like Drew Barrymore did. And I would say, you know, to her credit, she does actually give a decent performance. It's really interesting as this character is obviously the center of everyone's focus. Of course, her parents are trying to protect her, The police are after her, the lab agents are after her, all of the scenarios in the school are really, really interesting, as well as, of course, she's really bullied in the beginning, which really triggers her powers. And because she is so untrained at this young age to use her powers, she is just using it in a really unpredictable and unsafe way. However, by the end of this movie, I would say it's really, really great to kind of see how she has grown. And like I said, there is a boss level sequence, which is absolutely wicked. Next up, we have Sydney Lemmon, who is playing the Vicky character. She isn't in this movie that much, but it's really, really interesting actually from a mental health point of view with this character, as she talks about pushing her powers down and really not wanting to use it and wanting to have the same thing happen to the Charlie character. But as we know with emotions, when you do kind of constantly push them down, then they will burst and come out in a really unhealthy way. And I think it's really brilliant actually how this movie explores that. I wish, like all of the other things, that they would have gone into even more depth with it. But I think it was really interesting looking at a mental health angle through this character's vision and perspective on superpowers. We've also got Gloria Reuben, who is playing Jane, who has been gender switched from James in the book and the first movie, and she is the lab agent leader that is really telling everybody to find all of these people to bring them back so that they can do further experiments on them. This character is really, really great. I just would have loved it if she had even gone more crazier, because like I said, you can see the potential with this character being an absolute psychopath, and you do kind of see glimmers of that, but I would have loved it if she had just gone full-blown psycho mode. And then finally, we also have Michael Greyeyes, who is playing a character called Rainbird that is constantly after these characters. A little bit like the Winter Soldier, a little bit like Nemesis from the third Resident Evil movie, that kind of pops up every now and again. And because he's also a superpowered individual as well, he really is a proper threat towards all of these characters. So like I said, from a cast and characters point of view, they've got a really great cast, but they could have just given a lot more in their performances. So from a visuals point of view, I'd say they're pretty average in this movie. You can tell that the budget for this entire movie is pretty low. But that being said, I would say that, you know, all of the pyrokinesis scenes, all of the telepathy scenes, all of the telekinesis scenes do all look really, really decent. I mean, we have seen a lot of superpower based movies now, and so these powers have been better depicted in other installments. What I would say, you know, they do look decent here, and what I do really, really like is adrenaline-fueled chase sequences, which really does keep you on the edge of your seat. And the barn sequence, where you have all of these police officers, you have the lab agents, you have some human characters, you have some super-based powered characters. All of those sequences are really, really cool. And the way in which Zac Efron's character is able to control the minds and manipulate people into doing what he wants them to do, and the impact that this then has on his character is really, really interesting. Like I said, I would have loved it if they had an even bigger budget and they could have gone even bigger and grander with it. But for what they did do, I would say the visuals do work really, really well in this film. So from a comparison point of view, like I said earlier on, this is such a wannabe X-Men movie in terms of creating these very different isolated type of characters that have super-based powers, you know, feeling very isolated from society, having these human characters that are really, really evil, that want to kind of experiment on them. And with the horror edge and angle to it, you can actually compare it quite similarly to The New Mutants, which was recently released. And I would say, you know, the whole dark angle and the whole look on super-based powers and untrained individuals is really interesting. I guess you could also compare it to the 90s Alex Mack series in terms of a character that has super-based powers and these lab agents that are constantly on her tail. I know the 1984 version is very, very praised and is a lot stronger than this one from a storyline and script point of view, but obviously from a visuals point of view, even though the visuals aren't that great in this movie, they are a lot more superior to the 1984 version. I would also say you can compare this movie to The Old Guard, especially in that movie where, you know, super-based individuals do exist and there is a group of people that do actually just want to experiment on them. So a lot of comparisons with The Old Guard, and of course you can definitely compare it to Stephen King's other body of work, for example, It and Poltergeist. I would say those movies are a lot stronger than Stephen King. I mean, I'm not the biggest Stephen King horror-based fan, and I would say this film is very similar to other movies, but definitely does do its own thing as well. So overall, with Firestarter, you know, I don't think this movie is that amazing. I don't think it's that awful either. I definitely think they could have done so much more with this movie and truly made it really, really unforgettable. However, because they didn't do that, unfortunately, it is pretty forgettable. With that being said, there is potential for this movie to kickstart a wider franchise. They could look a lot more in terms of a bit of a prequel and the history of everything that happened on in the past. There is potential for a bit of a sequel, a spin-off series as well. So it'd be really, really interesting to see what's going to happen next. However, because this movie was so critically panned and commercially wasn't as successful as maybe they were hoping for it to be, It'll be interesting to see what on earth is going to happen next, but as far as the final score for this movie, I'm going to give Firestarter a solid 4.5 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear what you thought of this movie, so let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in my next video.